Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new, welcome. My name is Adelina and I make videos about living in a tiny house on wheels and living a more intentional life. And on Wednesdays, I usually do either a product review or something interesting like that, or a recipe. It's been a while since I've done a sweet dessert type recipe, and I did want to share this recipe. It's a coffee cake in that you eat it when you're having tea or coffee, but it also has instant coffee in the recipe. The recipe originally calls for walnuts. I actually have pecans. I like pecans better, but either one works. If you don't like nuts, just leave them out. When I ice it, I usually just take icing sugar, a little bit of non-dairy milk, and a little bit of instant coffee that I've dissolved in a little hot water, and mix that all together and use that as a drizzle on top as sort of the icing, which really is delicious. Sometimes I add a little maple syrup to that because the icing sugar is not sweet enough apparently, but you know how I am about my maple syrup. Anyways, if that sounds like something that you want to try, stay tuned. Let me show you the ingredients. Here are the ingredients for our coffee cake. You're going to need some flour, white flour, brown sugar, baking soda, some ground cinnamon, nutmeg. Now, the original recipe does call for cardamom. However, I really hate the taste of cardamom, but if you're making the traditional recipe, and I will put it in the ingredients list when I do the full recipe down below, there would also be cardamom. Salt, some non-dairy milk, I use oat, a light tasting non-flavored oil, canola oil in this case, some vanilla extract, lemon juice, either bottled or fresh, some instant coffee. I'm using this French vanilla because that's what I've got, but regular works fine. And then walnuts or pecans. These happen to be pecans. Now, the first thing I want you to do is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So 2.5 cups of flour. Oop. Well, there we go. I made my mess. Now I should be done for the recipe. One and a half cups of brown sugar. You can use white, but brown sugar definitely gives a better flavor. That is about all the brown sugar I have. We're just gonna call it 2.5 cups. Now we want 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And half a teaspoon of salt. Next, you want 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Nice rounded teaspoon of cinnamon. And 1 teaspoon of nutmeg. Half to 1, depending on whether or not you like nutmeg. Now, if you were adding cardamom, I would add a half a teaspoon of the nutmeg and half a teaspoon of the cardamom. But since I'm not, I'm using a full teaspoon of the nutmeg. And then let's give this a whisk and make sure that everything is incorporated. As with most cakes baking, when it comes to vegan baking, the rise is coming from not the eggs, it's coming from the combination of the baking soda or baking powder and some sort of acidity, in this case the lemon juice. So you want to make sure to get all of your dry ingredients mixed in really well, combine the wet ingredients separately, and mix those two together just before you're ready to bake. I'm going to set the dry ingredients aside, and we are going to do our wet ingredients. Into another bowl, you're going to combine 1.5 cups of non-dairy milk. I'm using oat milk. Works with any kind of non-dairy milk that you choose. Ooh, look at that. I'm on a roll today. 1/3 cup of oil. Now, where's my smaller measuring cup? You could try replacing the oil with applesauce. I've never done that. Okay, so that is 1/3 cup of oil. 1 tablespoon vanilla extract. And 3 tablespoons of the lemon juice. You could use apple cider vinegar as well. I wouldn't use white vinegar, but just something acidic, so lemon juice works well in baking. It won't give it a lemony flavor because all of the other ingredients are quite strong flavored. In a bowl, we're going to mix the coffee. So I want 3 tablespoons of instant coffee. If you don't like coffee flavor, this is not the recipe for you because it really does need this. And I'm going to mix that with 2 tablespoons of warm water. Get my cute little whisk out and give this a whisk so that it is fully dissolved before we add it into our wet ingredients. Awesome. So give that a good mix. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add my 1/3 cup of pecans or walnuts into the dry mix. So I'm just going to add them in now. Mix it into the dry and then mix the wet ingredients in there. And now we're going to fold this in. Try not to overmix. I just don't want any dried flour in the bottom. So I have a greased baking dish. I had originally got a smaller cake pan out, but it's not going to be big enough, and this thing will expand. So we're going to use this one. And I think that will be the right size. All right. So I'm going to set it on a cookie sheet. It just makes it easier. Just makes it easier to get in the oven. And we're going to put it in the 350 oven for about 40 minutes. I'm going to check it at 35. It'll either take 35 to 45 minutes depending on your oven, your altitude, and all of those things. So there. And I will see you back here in about 45 minutes. It's been 40 minutes, just over 40 minutes. I'm going to pull it out. Oh my God, that smells so good. I'm going to let that cool off. And then we'll cut into it. I just made a really simple glaze. I showed you what I did. It was basically icing sugar, vanilla, a little bit of maple syrup, and then I did end up throwing just a dash of salt and drizzling it on top. I don't really like icing on my cake, so let's give this a try. It is so good. The traditional English recipe does call for cardamom. Yeah. But like I say, I don't like that spice. I did, the first time I ever made it, when I veganized it, I did use it. Didn't like it very much. And I prefer it much more with the cinnamon and the nutmeg. But, you know, if you like cardamom, then definitely use it in this recipe, and just half the nutmeg. Use half teaspoon of nutmeg, half teaspoon cardamom. I think you guys will really like this. It's not super sweet because it's not fully iced. Feel free to ice it if you want. I hope you make it, and if you do, let me know. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.